Welcome to That's Inclusive, where we talk about disability and what it means to live a full life engaging in our communities. What does that look like, and how can we work together to make our world a more inclusive place?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of That's Inclusive. I am Pat Vincent Pierce. I'm a member of the council, and I have with me again one of my favorite people to hang around with, another council member, Seana Harburg. Seana, welcome. How have you been?
Thank you, Pat. It's so good to sit with you as always. In true transparency, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind in terms of how busy we've been in the disability community, fighting recently for all of the protections that we so value as a community. I got home last night after midnight. I stayed until I was the second to last speaker last night in front of the Senate Finance Committee, sharing testimony on behalf of my family and how important Medicaid, Social Security, special education, I could go on and on, mental health, how much those things matter to our family. So I'm happy to be here, but in all honesty, I'm a little bit tired.
I bet you are. I mean, and that's a perfect setup for what we're going to talk about today. There's been kind of a fire herd of baloney coming from some really powerful people, clearly aimed at the disability community.
Yep.
Not only dangerous rhetoric, but also cuts to vital programs and services. You and I, in our own ways, have been trying to push back. For instance, your testimony yesterday at the Senate budget hearing. But we also recently spoke at a handoff Medicaid rally. We both spoke. I'd like you to talk about this. Was this your first time speaking publicly? And then, how do you think the rally as a whole and the very tiny occupation of the governor's office, how do you think that all went?
So I think overall it went really, really well. I really appreciate the two individuals that put it together, Jules Good and Lisa Bodwin. It was my first time speaking at a rally. It wasn't my first time testifying. The rally energy is a little bit different. I actually enjoy it a little bit more because we were outside. It was a beautiful day. And we're amongst our supporters. At the rally, you're amongst everyone that energetically is feeling very much like you and holding space for you and there to support you. A little bit different than testifying when you know that the individuals necessarily don't view or have your same lived experience, and you're having to really ask for them to see you, which is it's a very different experience, asking for your humanity to be seen and honored. So I thought the energy of the rally was great. After we spoke, we had a number of people that came up afterwards and said they thanked me for my testimony and how moving it was, which is always lovely. But what I liked is that there were a number of people that spoke who had never spoken before and who said things like, when they got up, I never do this. I've never done something like this before, shared really heartfelt journeys, some of them even around loss, the death of a loved one, institutionalization, and great fears for what these cuts could mean for our New Hampshire moving forward. Going into the State House, we occupied a space in Governor Ayotte's office, and it was unlike what I had seen historically before. We had struggled to get a meeting with her. I've written to her over a dozen times this year, and I haven't gotten a response just during the budget season. And so a bunch of us came hoping to get a meeting after already putting it out there that we'd like one. And, you know, I think our presence was very, very powerful. I think it's something that needed to happen, but it was definitely something that has been spun a little bit in a way that I don't think it actually happened. I think that the way that we showed up was very professional. People held signs. Nobody was yelling. We sat quietly. There was one or two people that spoke to AYAT's chief of staff and just asked that we had repeatedly tried to get meetings. And we're very polite and very professional. And most of us, to be honest, were either disabled ourselves or mothers of disabled individuals who had backpacks with hand sanitizer and water bottles in them. So, there is some language about us being called insurrectionists. I would say that we were mothers who are very, very invested in the safety and well-being of our children. And we are disabled individuals who are terrified of losing the safeguards and supports that keep us living in our community and keep us functioning day to day. Another thing I wanted to mention is that, there were over 1,000 letters that had been brought to Governor Ayotte in the support of keeping their hands off of Medicaid. And I saw something that day that stuck out to me more than any of the testimony, stuck out to me more than, any of us showing up and being packed like sardines into that office. And what I saw, Pat, was actually your husband, Jim, in a moment I caught on camera that was about 2.5 to 3 minutes. And I was actually standing next to your daughter, which was one of, honestly, as an advocate, it was probably one of the most beautiful moments I've actually ever seen in my entire life. And I haven't shared this with you yet. And I actually might get emotional, but the two individuals that were hosting the rally kept saying to the chief of staff and then other staffers that came in, we just want a meeting on the books. Please, we just want a meeting on the books, and we'll leave once we actually have a meeting on the books. And no, we don't want to hand over all of these signatures to you. We don't feel comfortable because we're not sure she's actually getting them. And, you and Jim were kind of over in the corner, and I was near your daughter, and we were just watching, kind of tucked behind. And Jim asked to speak. And, for people that can't visualize Jim, Jim is a wheelchair user. It is a challenge for Jim to speak. He's challenging. It can be challenging to understand what Jim is saying. And Pat, you often work as interpreter for Jim, correct?
Yeah. I almost always repeat what he said just to make sure that people are understanding.
Right. And the chief of staff had been kind of in front of you guys, but not addressing you or Jim. And at one point, Jim asked, after the same message was repeated over and over about, please, can we just get a staffer to schedule something and then we can leave the office? And we had been there probably about, I want to say, I don't know, Pat, I might misspeak, but maybe 30 minutes at that point. It may have even been a little bit more. And Jim asked to speak, and the room got really quiet. And the chief of staff, who was dressed in a business suit, a man who is able-bodied, a man who, I don't know how often he's in disability spaces, but it didn't appear to me that it was something he's quite familiar with. Jim stopped and said, when he looked at all the pictures on the wall, he recognized all the governors before Ayotte, and he actually has had conversations with most of them and been invited in meetings with most of them. And he was somebody who was listened to. and was appreciated for their perspective and what they could offer. And he said, if I lose these benefits, I could die. And it took him a while to say what he wanted to say. And I want to give Pat a chance to add in what I missed or what I'm forgetting. But I turned and I looked at your daughter and I said to her, your father is such a badass. And she looked at me with the biggest smile and she goes, I know he is. And I said, I'm going to send you this video and you make sure your parents get it. And what I took away from that moment was, to be honest, the discomfort that chief of staff felt having to face Jim in Jim's complete authentic self, where he almost had to beg for somebody to listen to him and have a meeting with him about things that impact him being able to have a future.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you space. I was so emotional. I left feeling so many things, Pat. I left feeling absolutely gutted. I left feeling so incredibly proud to be part of such an incredible witnessing of showing up for each other. But I left really frustrated. To be honest, I left really sad and frustrated that's where we're at.
And so, but that's kind of where we've always been.
Okay.
To an extent.
Yep.
It's gotten better, it's gotten worse. But Jim has always had to go, hey, over here, listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because the assumption is that he can't talk or he has nothing to say. Or a lot of times the assumption is he's there as a gosh, sorry, word.
Is it a prop?
He's there as a prop, right?
Yeah.
They're assuming that he's there as a prop, that he can't speak for himself, and yet he has this wealth of experience. Just this amazing depth of knowledge and experience, and but this is how it's always been, and there have been people who are much better, and there are people who are much worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he's always prepared to go, excuse me, pay attention over here. I have something to say. Uh, so that was nothing new, but of course this took the it took the chief of staff back, and he was like, "Well, no, I can't say no." But and we found out that what he said that he couldn't, what he had been saying for 40 minutes that he couldn't do, he actually could.
The second that Jim was done, he walked away. He was gone for 5 minutes and came back with a card with a time and date for the meeting.
Yeah, so the whole, oh, there's a process, we can't do it, was baloney.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something we're used to doing. It's something that happens often. I mean, often when we're out together, people will talk to me instead of to him. It's unfortunately not uncommon, and so we're used to it. Should we have to be used to it? Probably not, but it is what it is.
Right. It was very powerful to witness, but left me again with a lot of mixed emotions.
Yeah.
The most beautiful moment was watching your daughter watch you two. That to me was just one of the most, I will take that memory with me, Pat. Truly, I will take that memory with me for the rest of my life, watching her parents work so hard for the disability community. It was really incredible.
Well, thank you. I mean, that means a lot to us. I think it's such a part of our life that we don't even think about how remarkable it is.
Yes.
And so it's nice to hear that people are noticing.
Yes.
Um,
100%. 100.
yeah. So after the rally and before we spoke, actually, there was a reporter at the rally from the Concord Monitors. She interviewed a bunch of people, and uh, I feel like her article went out by the end of the day. She had turned it around fairly quickly, from what I remember. And she talked to you. And when the article came back, you texted me and oh my gosh, this is awful. It sounds terrible. And I had read the article and I'm like, you were great.
Okay.
I don't understand what you're talking about. So why don't you explain why you felt the way you did about the article?
Okay. So I think, I often, I've shared a little bit about my new discovery of my own neurodivergence and the fact that I often will say exactly what I'm thinking and then sometimes lose my social filter. Um, and when, which can be wonderful, but it can also be like, did I overstep? And so I'm profoundly aware as somebody who um, advocates for disability that I don't have the same lived experience as you, Pat, nor Jim, nor my children or my family members. But I was not I was not scared in that moment. I felt so passionate and so angry. And I said things that I typically may have kind of held back from. And I said things like losing our Medicaid funding is a slow genocide and that people will die. I mean, there are people that are bed bound that without having somebody come into their home and clean them and feed them, I mean, it's catastrophic. And what we don't see are the people. We don't see the most vulnerable of us are often not able to take spaces at the Capitol, at the State House, at meetings we attend. Those are our most vulnerable neighbors. And so I put it all out there. And then I immediately, I think, because of my own probably family of origin stuff and feeling like I'm too much or too big or too loud, all stuff I'm trying to work on, immediately retracted and was like, oh my gosh, did I overstep? I hope I didn't speak out of turn. And the response was that I didn't. And the response was that I spoke power and truth. And so, a good lesson for me that it's okay to be really uncomfortable, and a good reminder that this stuff is uncomfortable when we're talking about people's lives and we're talking about life or death. For some people, it's very uncomfortable.
Right, and what I wanted to say too is that when in Jim and I have been interviewed by a lot of different reporters, and a lot of times will read what they wrote afterwards and think, that wasn't quite what I was saying, that wasn't quite how I intended to come across. But we, if we're gonna be courageous and we're gonna speak the truth, it's gonna be messy.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna sound, sometimes it's gonna sound exactly like we intended to. Sometimes we're gonna hit that nail right on the head. And sometimes it's gonna come back and we're gonna go, oh, maybe not. But we need to keep speaking.
Yep.
Right? We need to keep, and passion behind our words. It would drive those words home. It's your point about, right, it's the vulnerable people who couldn't be there today, who need to be remembered. They need to be seen. And the slow genocide, oh my gosh. What an incredible turn of phrase, and how true. It was just, I was in awe of your ability to think in those terms on the spur of the moment. So, um, you know, and I think back over the history of the disability rights movement and all the voices and all the things that were said and it all, if everyone if everyone was super careful about every word that came out of their mouth, we would not be here.
Right. And
So
I think we're in this new territory. And I don't think it's a completely new territory. Eugenics is part of our, I think what happened when I am thinking more as we're talking, that article was written, I think maybe a day or two after RFK Jr. spoke about the autism registry. And I think it was right. I think it was that same week. And I think for me, somebody who, you know, a lot of my advocacy is specifically around the autistic experience. And when we think about the dark past of eugenics and autism, I think that a lot of people have a hard time even thinking about that past, a very real past, and a past that wasn't that long ago. But I think I think we've been somewhat protected by the images that we have politically in the past, right? Like I don't think the community hasn't been harmed. It's been harmed for a long time. It's been harmed under democratic governance as well. It's just that right now things are being said out loud that we aren't used to hearing out loud so blatantly. What do you think about that?
well, like as I reflect on the history of the disability rights movement, I mean it seems like I'm trying to remember. No, I think even when there were large institutions, but wait, there was a lot of terrible things going on, but it wasn't verbalized as as blatantly as it is now. Not that I remember, but I've been thinking, because I've been working with a lot of different people who represent a lot of different interests within the disability community. So and 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 it got me thinking back to there were these times, these touch points in disability history that people with all sorts of disabilities look back on and go, that was it. that was the moment we all came together and we all spoke with one voice, and it was beautiful. It was this kumbaya moment. And if you study the history, it was not a kumbaya moment. but,
Right.
but,
Right.
but there was a lot of infighting, there were disagreements. I think back to so hopefully I will put this on. I'll remember to send this to Vanessa for the notes. But there's a lot of videos if you look up 504 sit-in or 504 rally. There's a lot of videos about the time when people with disabilities were demanding that the government implement 504 Section 504 of the Rehabilitative Act, which required all all programs receiving federal funds to be made accessible to people with disabilities. So with a really small sort of thumb note at the end of the Rehabilitative Act, and it needed to have enabling legislation that sort of fleshed out what that meant. And so the Department of, it was called HUE. It wasn't Health and Human Services at the time. It was Housing, Employment, and something. But they were supposed to be creating the enabling legislation that specified what exactly that meant, right? Who 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 was covered under Section 504, what federally funded um programs had to do exactly what, and they weren't creating this enabling legislation. So it passed in 73 and 77. They still hadn't created the legislation, and people were getting mad. People were getting pissed. So they staged sit-ins around the country. The longest occupation of a federal building was during the sit-in 77 in San Francisco. And if you watch the videos now of it, it looks so kumbaya. But one thing you'll notice is that it's mostly people with physical disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
right? The, they don't interview anybody with an intellectual disability. I mean, autism wasn't even really talked about.
Right.
So this beautiful kumbaya moment was not was complicated, right? It was complicated. And then I think of the passage of the American with Disabilities Act. There were a lot of people in the independent living movement who wanted the ADA to focus solely on physical accessibility. They did not want to be including people with intellectual disabilities and psychiatric disabilities. They thought it would complicate. There was a lot of fighting. And so now I have people coming to me and going, well, why isn't this group cooperating? Right? We have this great message, and we all have the same issue, but this group wants to message it differently, or this group is not speaking out because the Medicaid that's under attack is not the long-term care program, it's the Medicaid expansion. So they're not cooperating, they're not speaking as loudly as we think they should. And what I want to say to those people is, this is nothing new. Oh, we are an extremely diverse community with extremely diverse needs, and we we're all facing the same threat, and there is value in speaking with one voice, but we need to remember that that's a huge lift, and that when people push back against us and say we need to be quiet, or we need to wait for this to come out, or it's nothing new. We can't be surprised by that. We can't be slowed down by that. We need to just speak our own truth and keep open to anyone joining us who wants to, and just keep going.
It sounds like a powerful message that, for how many gains there had been made, the work has always been an uphill battle, and a good reminder that, like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And that I think that all of us, regardless of where we are in the movement, need to be showing up. And not, I think the messaging is important, but I think what's important is to share your message. It sounds like you're saying.
Exactly.
Because, right, the more we can, and I think that, that's happening in some other circles I'm in, that people are really worried about the message. But I think what's more important is sending the message that this isn't working, the status quo isn't working, and that we need people to be held accountable for the decisions they're making.
Right.
Go ahead.
We need a specific message. We need to all be on the same page. But I've heard a few people talk about recreating like a 504 moment or a capital Qua moment. Those moments, nobody set out to create those moments. Those moments just happened. And a lot of them happened not because of things, but in spite of things.
Yeah. Yep. We're seeing that now, though, too. I mean, we're seeing that there was a protest, not disability related, but there was a big nationwide protest on the 5th of April. And then suddenly people were like, well, we're going to do it again on the 19th. And a lot of it was just organic. And I think that's part of a movement is that that you get information and then the pushback occurs because of the information you've just received.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes again to how much people are consuming. But I think taking in what you can and remembering to find your joy when you can, rest is so crucial, and most of us don't do enough of it. And I think reminding ourselves that, I think part of showing up is there is going to be discomfort, and that's okay, because through that you find your voice, you find your message, you find your authentic message that matters to you.
And we eventually get on the same page.
Yeah.
And the moment that feels so messy, so disorganized, so maybe even silly.
Yeah.
Now, in 30 years, we may be looking back on it as a touch point, at the moment in time that changed everything. So I guess I'm hoping that what people take from this is that whatever they're doing, if they're involved in any way, they're doing great.
Exactly.
You're all doing great.
Yeah.
Just keep on keeping on.
Right.
And all anyone will remember in 10, 20, 30 years from now is that we rose to the occasion. However that looked, it may look messy to us now, but that's all we're going to remember. So
I love that. Somebody took a picture of me last night at 11 p.m. doing my testimony, and half of my hair was up, half of my hair was down. My pants were so rolled up in because I'd been sitting so wonky. I could barely stand up straight because I'd been sitting so many hours. And somebody caught a picture of me, and I looked at it and I was like, whoa. But we do what we can. And then, like today for me is going to be a rest and recovery day after a long night last night. And I think just reminding everybody to please take care of themselves too. Please take care of yourself. And just thank everybody for the ways they are showing up in any way that you're showing up. And even if that means, you're quietly doing things to take care of yourself, that's great.
yeah, exactly. Thank you for all your work out there. Take care of yourselves, and we're here. We're here behind you, cheering you on. So, thanks again, Seana,
Yeah,
Shauna, for
no problem.
being here with me.
Yeah, thank you, Pat, and to everybody listening, take care.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vanessa Blaze, and this was a production of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, produced by Isadora Rodriguez-Legendre and Vanessa Blaze, with many thanks to Josh Hardy and the rest of the crew here at Concord TV. We love to have guests with differing perspectives. These views are personal and do not necessarily represent those of the DD Council.